Excellent. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And Christine, it's so good to see you.
Thanks, Maggie. It's great to be here.
So for everyone who hasn't met me, I'm Maggie McGrath. I'm the editor of Forbes Women, and I'm so excited to talk to Christine. I was talking to a source earlier this month about how the chief people officer is the new mission critical CEO succession planning position. And I won't put you on the spot about your career goals just yet, but I do think the pandemic has really thrust this role into higher profile. You know, you are managing a company's most vital resource, the workforce. And we've seen how workforces are under pressure over the last 18 months.
Sure.
But I want to, and your journey has been so interesting. And I want you to tell our audience, because I think this number is eye popping. You joined Duolingo after 2 decades at Vanguard in 2016. How many employees were there when you joined, and what does that number look like today?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Maggie. So we started, we didn't really even have a good number when I joined. So that should tell you something. Somewhere between 60 and 75 in that neighborhood. And now we're officially north of 500. And, next year we'll be experiencing that same level of headcount growth trajectory. So probably end of the year, maybe about 750, somewhere in that neighborhood. So a lot of growth year on year.
So I have so many questions about that, but what's been the biggest challenge in your role as that number has ballooned and will continue to balloon?
Chief people officer involves obviously all of the people. And there was this interesting quote somewhere, and it's probably not super fact-based, but the idea is basically in people's lives, every year they experience one big event where they need some kind of support. If you think about this past year in your own life, can you think of one thing where it was like, wow, that was, a family member was sick, you were sick, something, you were moving, you were changing jobs, something was going on for you. And anytime someone is going through that transition, they need, they don't just leave that at home, they bring it with them to work. And so, really thinking about, especially in this, these last 2 years, how to support employees through all of the challenges that they might be facing. As that number of employees grows, that means that inevitably now we're over 500, at least one a day is experiencing something where they need some kind of support. So I think that's just one tiny element of the role that gives you kind of a perspective of, as that headcount grows, what some of the challenges might be.
Absolutely. And during the pandemic, I'm sure it's more than one event per person.
It's been a lot for all of us, right?
Different times of year. I think April, March 2020 in New York City, some of us were under different pressure. And then, you saw the waves go through.
For sure.
But let's talk about building culture, because I've talked to founders about how the company has such a cool feel at 20 people, 30 people, and then headcounts ballooning. How do you maintain the smaller culture, the original culture? How do you maintain values? And how do you think about that?
You're right. It's so hard, right? In those early days, culture is just 10 people sitting around the lunch table. So I think what our founders did very early on, which I think is really important for all founders to think about, is what kind of company did they want to have? What kind of culture did they want to create? And they were super intentional about it. So down to a small detail, they wanted to come every day to work in a fun place, somewhere that they looked forward to, with people that they actually were excited to work with. And one small element of that was they ate lunch together every day. And that really gave the folks a chance to get to know each other on a deeper level. And that tradition, even though we have 500 employees, we still do that to this day. So I think it's, obviously we've had to scale in different ways. It's thinking about what are all of those little elements and how can you keep them intact as you grow. And also, equally as importantly, shed the things that don't fit anymore. Let go of those attributes that just aren't serving you as you continue to scale.
That's so interesting. So did you keep the lunches during the height of the pandemic? Were you all on Zoom at noon for everyone's local time and eating your sandwiches?
We did the Zoom lunch thing for a while. And it's so funny because what you don't realize is when you're all, you have a giant Zoom, everyone's normally on mute. And so you're just sitting there silently eating. So I think what we learned is maybe we can do lunches, but, maybe on a more team level. So there's smaller groups of people. So it's not so awkward just watching everyone eat. Yeah, it was pretty funny in the early days.
I feel like I've had a few team meetings always at noon, and I keep like scooching off camera to like take a bite and then like
take a bite and come back.
covering my mouth. It's
right.
Challenges of hybrid environment, which
so true.
I want to get to your future plans. But before we get to that, you had Duolingo had a really big event this year, an IPO, a very successful IPO.
Yes.
How does that affect culture? Because I know that's a huge event. That's a huge milestone worth celebrating. But I imagine the before and after can feel different to folks.
Yeah, it's, I think what's maybe helping us is that at our core, we're a mission-driven organization. So, our mission is to develop the best education in the world and make it universally available. And we have this vision about breaking down global inequality through access to education. And the IPO is just a means to that end. And I think that really helps. It's easy to get carried away in startup land for, what that IPO might mean in terms of personal wealth creation. And that's all great. But if your fundamentals are about a broader mission that's to do something great for the world, then I think it's nice to always come back to that anchor. And, we continue to have the mission at our forefront every single day in all of our decision making. So for us, the money is just a means to that end.
That makes sense. Now, as you think about how you personally have navigated this role from 60, 70 people to where you are now, through an IPO, through stay-at-home orders, to now our current reality, what are some tools that you have used as an executive? I think I read something about a listening tour at some point. Like, what are some strategies you've employed that have helped you craft strategy?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So way back in the very beginning, when we had a smaller number of employees and I could meet with everyone, the first thing that I did was did the rounds and met with every single employee to hear from them. What's working here? What do you love about Duolingo and you never want to change? And then, what are some things that maybe we've outgrown? And what are some challenges that you're facing day to day? And it was so important to hear from the employees early on. First of all, I got to know everyone, which is great. And that makes my job much easier. Building that trust early on, letting people know that they could come to me, because frankly, that the first HR people role in any organization, folks can have different perspectives on that. There can be some suspicion about like, well, what are you going to do around here really? Like, what is this job all about? And so I think just humanizing it, letting folks know I'm just a real person and I'm here to support you and ultimately have you succeed over the years. I think that helped out a lot. Because those relationships are built early on, and then going forward, I recruited a lot of the next tranche of employees. So inevitably I know them too. And I get to meet all of our new hires in onboarding. So I think just figuring out how to connect early on with employees and establish the trust of not just, me, but also my function is really important, because then if you set it up where you're constantly listening to what the employees are saying, it makes figuring out how to support them through the years much easier.
That makes sense. We actually just had a small group session with our human resource team yesterday, or it's happening over the next 3 months, and I happened to go yesterday. And one of the things that came up was time zones and how to balance. We've been hiring, we have team members in Europe and in Asia, and what's the best time for a team meeting if you have folks in Europe, New York, and San Francisco? I think like 1 p.m. Eastern might be the sweet spot, but don't quote me on that. Duolingo has such a global perspective, right, with the languages and the education. How do you think about this issue? I think the session title is Bridging the World. How are you doing that from your role?
There's no magic wand here, right? It's really hard. It's really hard to figure that out. We have an office in Beijing. We just opened an office in Berlin. So be on the lookout there for all my folks in Germany. And yeah, you're right. We have another team in Seattle, so West Coast time. So bridging all of those time zones is just a real logistical challenge. One kind of rule that we made is we try to keep the teams as intact as we can in a particular location. It's not perfect, trust me, and it gets harder as we continue to grow, but we really try to keep people together as much as possible. And then if folks are making decisions based on their personal needs that they have to move to another location, we try to have them, hey, you can kind of live wherever you want within reason. We like everyone together in the office, but if you have a need somewhere else, then you have to be within 3 hours of the time zone of your team. So that also has helped a little bit, but probably like you, everything is recorded on Zoom for folks to watch on whatever time zone is appropriate for them, like all hands and Q&A sessions and things like that. But it is tough. So another thing that we do that's like pretty old-fashioned is we have an annual trip. So in February of 2022, this is happening. We took 2 years off, but 2022 is happening. We're actually all going to Cancun. So we load everyone up on planes and fly them all to Cancun, Mexico, where we spend 4 days just on a company retreat, team building, and really getting to know one another. And, there's just no substitute for that in real life, human to human interaction. It's so important. And I know there's a huge trend to, all remote these days. And I understand that. And it certainly unlocks certain aspects of global talent that makes it now more available. But boy, we still find that in person to be just so important.
Well, and that brings me to your plans and how are you navigating this hybrid world? I was talking to one of your team members. So what is the Duolingo return to office policy, future plans?
That has certainly been evolving over the past year, right? As new data comes in all the time, basically. So right now we will be asking everyone to come back to their hub location. So we have hubs in the US and around the world. And that will start second week of January. Everyone is vaccinated. So we're asking, that the offices are vaccinated offices. So you have to be vaccinated to come back. And we're moving to a 3+2 schedule. So we're asking folks to be in their hub office Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So everyone is all together. And Mondays and Fridays are optional, obviously. If you want to come in to avail yourself of the free food, the massages, and the other incredible benefits, you're great. If you're more comfortable at home, that's totally fine. So that's our approach, which is, again, a little bit old-fashioned and a little bit, centered on the office, because we believe fundamentally in the importance of connection and collaboration, both for building and sustaining culture, but also for innovation. That's been super important for us.
Well, as you think about tapping into different cultures and educating around cultures, I do imagine connecting with the team members who have those different perspectives. It is a different conversation when you are in person versus on Zoom.
Yeah.
So every job is also different, right? As a reporter, I can sit at home and make the same phone calls that I would make from the office. So I think the conversations with my team have probably been very different than the types of conversations that you guys are having. But what's the reaction been like from your workforce? Are they excited?
We have eased into this. So we opened the office, I can't even remember, probably sometime over the summer for people to come in optionally, as they would like. And we've seen attendance grow week by week over time, as vaccinations certainly became more universally available, and then people just gained in comfort. I have to tell you, the first day that I came back, we had an all hands in real life, and it was kind of strange. Being in a room again. I don't know if you all have experienced that as you've been just kind of returning to normal life. That first time when you're back in that setting, it is a little jarring. And so I think, giving people that like on-ramp almost, to let them get their feet wet over time in a way that's comfortable for them has worked really well for us. So, the reaction has been mostly positive. There are a couple folks that would like to continue to work from home forever. And we knew that we would encounter that. And we're kind of dealing with those on a one-on-one exception kind of process.
We had an outdoor Christmas in July party as a replacement for the 2020 party. And just this past July. And I was standing off to the side because I had the same kind of reaction. But it was funny. You watch people walk into the group and there was a moment of people.
Is this
And
okay?
also a lot of like, you're so much taller and or shorter than I would have expected.
That's still happening. Yeah. It's funny how you conjure people's images in your head, and then they don't always match with reality. It's so funny.
We've only been saying like shoulder up for the past like 2 years.
So true.
I think we're almost at time, but because this is the Superwoman Summit, I wanted to ask you, what is your superpower?
Oh my gosh. Um, Probably adaptability, which has certainly been tried over the past year and a half, right? But yeah, just being able to figure out in this moment, what is needed from the company, and what is needed from our employees, and what's needed from the world, and figuring out how to flex. And that's certainly been a strength that has done me well over the last year and a half or so. And I'm sure there will be more challenges ahead. But that's definitely, I think, what I would describe as my superpower.
That's a good one to have. And I think with that, we are at time. But I can't wait to see what you do. I can't wait to check in on these challenges. It seems like you've been navigating them well. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights with our audience. And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, Maggie. It's been a delight.
Take care.